Hello, this is Bob Fraser. I'm the co-founder of Aspen Funds, and we're preparing here our economic forecast for 2021. We've done this every year for many, many years, and it's really our investment thesis for 2021, and we look at a lot of data. My focus for the last 20 years has been to look at the tides. There's a lot of noise, and this information age, you think it would be very helpful, and it actually is detrimental because so much of what we're hearing is actually noise and what I call the waves. And so there's a lot of economic waves that are hitting that have various levels of effect. But what I like to focus on is the tides. What things that are moving that are really you can't stop it, that are dramatic in their effect. And so I focus most of my thinking on the tides. Really, what are the big picture elements that are moving, the very slow moving, inexorable kind of impacts. So we're going to look at this year is a very pivotal year with a new president and possibly a new tax regime, as well as the COVID crisis and how that's going to play out. All right, so we're going to dive right in here. Let me jump into the slides. All right, and first I'm going to look at just the general economy. I want to point out one of the major trends that has happened in this 2020 COVID regime was this work from home reality. This is a chart from Castle Systems. They manage key card systems in 2,681 buildings. And according to them, basically, we're seeing about 85% of U.S. office workers working from home, and it's gone up to now 80%. So it's amazing, how many people are actually working from home, and so pretty major impact. I'm just going to zoom through several of these slides, and TSA travel, according to TSA check-ins. We're seeing travel is still down about 70%. So no businesses can survive at that level, but it's up from a 95% drop in April. So, and you see just recently even taking even a greater dive down. According to OpenTable, who manages dining reservations, we're seeing dining down as much as 40% to 90%. So the warm weather climes like Florida, it's down 40%. But in other places like Illinois, New York, we're seeing dining is down 90%. So again, that's just incredibly challenging for these small businesses. Movies down 90%, according to Box Office Mojo. Gasoline consumption, you can see it's off just about 14%, but it was off 50% in April. So a lot of people, our assumption here is a lot of people are traveling still, but they're driving instead of flying. Lodging is down 38% year over year. This is a super hard hit sector. The black line here is 2009. This is the worst year for hotels since the Great Depression, and today we're trending well below that line and dropping as at the end of 2020. Super hard hit. This is data from Harvard University and Brown University. Percent change in small business revenue. Small businesses are bearing the brunt of the downturn, and so total small business revenue literally was down. This is the blue line here is down 50% in April. Right now is down a third. Especially hard hit is education and health, which hit 60% drop, and hospitality and leisure 70% drop. So some industries, it's not equally affected all industries, and it's still not doing well. And one of the things that I want to point out here, and I'll do that here. This is the number of businesses that have closed. 45% of all small businesses closed in April. That's how bad it was. And we're up now to just 25% of small businesses closed. And I want to point out this line here. At this bottom, you look at the bottom was falling out right here, and then this is exactly when the PPP program started, the payroll protection program, which basically was a direct injection program to businesses to help them keep the doors open and pay employees. And in my opinion, the PPP program was an absolute game changer that allowed many small businesses to remain open or reopen, and thus jobs. So you see right here, this is literally, the trend reversed from down to up, right here. So it was an absolute game changer for our country. Looking at the defaults, right now, 24% of lodging loans are in special servicing, and that's industry bank code word for loss mitigation and debt collection. So 25% of lodging loans are in debt collection, 16% of retail. This is the special servicing rates. This is the percentage of loans that are in collection. These are commercial mortgages that are in collection. You see it just really hit and accelerated here. 74% of U.S. hotels said they expect to lay off more employees, and 2/3 warning they won't be able to last another 6 months, which is why I was very excited to see the second PPP program rolling out. It is very necessary to get us, to bridge us to the true recovery. According to Alignable, 35% of small businesses can't pay December rent. So there's a crisis is still alive and well. Unlike the great financial crisis, there's a lot of people talking about this being very similar to the great financial crisis of 2008. It's really not. 2008 financial crisis was a systemic crisis, and it spread to banks and spread to basically the financial plumbing of the world. It was in crisis. We're not seeing that. So this is the number of assets on the problem bank list, according to the FDIC. You can see we hit 900 banks, basically, that were literally, on the brink, teetering on the brink. Today we're at around 50. So it really has not affected banks, and that's when these financial crises really explode and spiral, is when a financial shock becomes a banking shock, because the banks, again, are the financial plumbing of the world. The second COVID relief bill, which, as I'm recording this, is probably going to be signed into law, or some version of it, is a very good solution, in my opinion. It includes another PPP2, $284 billion. $166 billion in direct payments to individuals of $6,000. They're arguing now about making it $2,000 possibly. And another unemployment benefits of $300 per week. So these are very critical for the hard-hit sectors. The PPP program, what happens if without something like that, these businesses will lay off more employees, and those jobs, once you lose a job, it's very difficult to get a job back. If you can keep the job somehow, we can ensure a quick recovery. And the same with unemployment benefits, putting a little cash in people's pockets, allowing them to pay their rent and buy groceries, keeps them from entering into a tailspin where it's injury begins to happen, true injury, economic injury begins to happen. And so these are really good programs. There's a bunch of other programs in addition: a $25 billion emergency rental aid, a national eviction moratorium, and funding for colleges, transportation, et cetera. One of the things that a lot of people have been predicting is high inflation, and this is due to all the stimulus, and it really hasn't happened. Here is 4 measures of consumer price inflation, and basically since 2011, say, we've been in the 2% range by however you measure it. So we, in spite of the aggressive money printing, we've simply not seen inflation run rampant, and there's reasons for that. In a future discussion, we'll talk about why inflation is low and what is the effect of these stimulus programs, long-term effect. Um, the unemployment rate spiked up to nearly 15%, about 14.5%, and is now dropped down to 6%. So we've seen again the stimulus programs have really had their effect, and as soon as those things rolled out, it was like a relief just across the United States, economically speaking. So we're seeing still elevated, but not too bad. Part-time for economic reasons, which is a broader measure of unemployment, we're seeing again that spiked up very high, but is still high, but is far lower than it was. A little surprising, perhaps, industrial production and trade. So this is U.S. industrial production since the 60s. And you can see basically it took a pretty massive dip, very similar to what happened in the '08 crisis, but the recovery has been dramatic. And so industrial production is up, as well as trade and imports and exports, almost identical. So the people adapted, and businesses adapted, and consumption continued. So it's really a lot better than I was expecting. Some amazing, shocking realities here is that homeowners are actually doing very well. So literally we're on pace in 2020 for a record 9 million refis in 2020. Absolutely a record. And this includes 27% of those are cash out refis, where you actually take money out, use your home as an ATM, pulling money out. The rest are just rate and term refis, but that puts cash flow in homeowners' pockets. So homeowners are putting cash and cash flow into their pockets in a major way. And so homeowners are actually doing quite well, even in the crisis. This is a very shocking graph to many, and this shows household net worth, according to the Federal Reserve. Household net worth, and it's booming. And so you can see what's happened. Here's 2020. You can see what's happening. Household net worth has just skyrocketed, and the reason is it's driven by, one, a strong stock market, and two, housing price gains. So we're seeing, this is across all households. So for those that own homes and own stocks, it's higher than the average that we're seeing here. So again, we're seeing a very bifurcated economy, right? Those that are affected are gravely affected and gravely harmed, but the broader the whole is really quite healthy. Another surprising statistic: look at the personal savings rate. So it just went ballistic here as people stayed home and they didn't travel, they didn't shop, they didn't go out to eat. Guess what they did? They saved. And so the personal savings rate skyrocketed. So people are very, very cash rich. I could show you charts on the banking and the deposits massively increasing in this period. This is actually quite predictable. Consumer and business optimism. These are important to look at because so much of the economy is actually built on sentiment. If you believe that things are going to get better, then you invest, right? And you spend. And if you believe that things are getting worse, then you don't. And so economic activity is in a lot of ways very, very dependent upon mindset. And so this consumer sentiment is very important. Consumer sentiment is super important because 70% of the economy is actually consumer spending. So if consumers stop spending, we would have an economic crash. And so consumer sentiment is very important. And what's happened during COVID, consumer sentiment just got crushed. But what you're seeing is here late, it's ticking up slightly. So this is not good, but also, a lot of room for improvement. Business sentiment is very different. Business sentiment is what drives jobs and investment in capital spending. So a confident business is going to hire people, and it's going to invest in new technologies, new plants, equipment, et cetera. And so that has recovered quite rapidly. And again, the timing here times perfectly with the PPP program. And it wasn't just the cash injections of PPP, but the fact that the government was willing to not let this spiral out of control. So business people said basically, okay, they've got our backs, and we're not going to spiral down to a second Great Depression, which in my opinion could have happened. And the way the Great Depression happened in the 30s, of course, we had this financial shock in 1929, but then they didn't have the tools. The central banks didn't have the tools at the time to stimulate, or even the mindset that they should or could. And so then you get in this destructive cycle where people lose their jobs. Well, people that lose their jobs stop spending. And once people stop spending, then businesses go down. And once businesses go down, well, then they lay off employees, so they lose their jobs. And so this becomes this destructive cycle that basically self-destructs. So it's very important, these stimulus programs, to actually stop that cycle and create a virtuous cycle where you create jobs, and then those people with jobs now spend, boosting the economy, which creates more jobs. All right, so that's all for this session, and then we'll look at part 2 is the COVID-19 economic recovery.